Hey everybody, it's your old pal Wood Doofus here. My boys recently joined the chess club at school, and even though they don't know how to play chess and they don't have a chessboard, that's what they decided to do. I had some pieces of maple and walnut, and I decided to try and make them a chessboard, something I've never done before. This guy right here, he's totally worth it. He's got a twin brother that's not here because he's playing video games, and he never comes when I tell him to come. Have you ever won a chess game in your life?
Yeah.
Who did you win against?
My brother.
Oh, just Rogan because he doesn't know how to play either?
I'm better than him.
So what I started with, I had some pieces of walnut, a little bit over 4 inches long, and I had a piece of wormy maple that was also a little over 4 inches long. Because I'm going for 2-inch squares, I cut it to 34, which I needed 32, but I gave myself a little extra wiggle room there. And so now I have these 4 pieces here that I cut out of those 2 boards. And I'm going to glue them up now. So if you're making a chessboard out of hardwood like I am, you will need a planer and a table saw, and that's basically what I'm going to be using, maybe a miter saw back there. The only other option if you don't have a planer is to get it milled at the lumber store wherever you buy the wood. Maybe they can mill it nice and flat and consistent and give you a good joint and a good flat surface. And you might be able to get by with that, but it would still be difficult. So I've already planed these boards down. I made sure to send the walnut and the maple through one right after the other until they got to the thickness. Basically, I planed them until they got rid of all the rough edges. That's when I took them to the table saw and ripped them down into 2-inch lengths, or 2-inch widths. So here we go with the glue up. All right, so this has been clamped up for a while, so I'm going to take the clamps off. And then I'm going to send it through the planer here like this. I'm going to chop it in half and glue it up again. So I want to be able to run this thing through the table saw to make the 2-inch strips going this way, but in order to do that I need one flat reference edge. And after the glue up, these aren't exactly flat. There's some that are proud of everything else, and so this side is higher than that side, so if I tried to run that through the table saw against the fence, they would come out crooked. So I'm trying something I've never tried before because I do not have a joiner. And that's this system right here where I have the blade coming up through a piece of material that's anchored to the fence. I took off the riving knife, and as you pass this through, it basically joints the edge for you, which seems to work. I use it on this side, and I'll show you on the other side just for the sake of demonstration. And I'm going to start with the taller side and feed it in from there, maybe make 2 passes. So here's the edge I got off of that. It's on my table saw, which I don't know, should be pretty flat, probably the flattest thing I got in here. And I don't see any rock or any major gaps. I wouldn't say that it's perfect, but I'll say that it's good enough for what I'm doing. Looks like this wood doofus forgot to put the riving knife back on. Better do that. Now it's starting to look like a chessboard, but I think before I do another glue up, I'm going to send all these pieces through the planer again to get some of this glued edge fixed up. But I don't have time right now, so I'll do it later. Once I cut those strips out of the last material, I did the checkerboard clamp up. Now when I did that checkerboard clamp up, it's important to clamp it up on all four sides to make sure you try to get these squares where they're supposed to be and not slipped around a little bit. But anyway, once I pulled it out of the clamps, I had one side that was flat from where I had cut it before, but I had one side that was a little wobbly because that was the ends of the glue up. So I needed to get my makeshift joiner out again, and this time I cut a space for the riving knife so I could just leave it in there. And I went ahead and passed it through a couple times on each side. And luckily it was just a little bit longer in that dimension than it was in the other one, so doing those shave offs got everything pretty much square. The other issue that I ran into after the last glue up was that there was still a little bit of lips here and there, and glue was stuck in those lips where everything wasn't perfectly flush. Now I guess I could have used more cauls, which are just straight boards that go across and you clamp them on. If I'd put more cauls on there and put more clamps on there, maybe I could avoid some. But at the end of the day, I don't think I could have 100% avoided the lippage issue and the uneven issue. So I needed some way to flatten it. Now this is 16 inches, which is too wide for my planer, so I had to come up with a different idea. One way to do that is if you have a drum sander, which I don't have, so I couldn't do that. The other thing I tried was to call somebody that I know that has a shop, and I said, hey, do you have the equipment I need to get this checkerboard flat? And they said no. The next option I thought of was to make a router sled that would flatten it, and that's what I tried. So that's what this is. Let me show you. So over here I got my makeshift router sled system. Now the key to having a router sled work that will actually flatten something is to have everything involved also be flat. So I got a flat piece of MDF on my flat MDF workbench, and I have some more MDF rails over here. And then I have a piece of plywood here. The plywood has some rails that fit my palm router here. So the idea is to run your router back and forth over this thing on this sled as it sits flat, and it's going to shave off a little bit or however much you set your bit to. Now they make bigger bits than this, but this is the biggest bit I had, and I decided to try it with what I had. Now if it doesn't sit flat to begin with, you're going to have to put some shims wherever the gaps are. I was lucky enough to have it sit flat on one side, even though I still needed to shave that side. So I did that, and I shaved one side down, which made one side flat. It took a lot of passes to go back and forth and move this down along the way. And sometimes it took off material where there's a hump, and sometimes it left it alone where there wasn't a hump, and that's ideal because then you're getting it flat and you're getting rid of those lips. So I worked my way all the way across as I went back and forth, and then I flipped it over, and I did the same thing using my micro adjustment feature on this really cheap router. The next thing I want to do is to glue up a frame on this now that I got it all squared up, and I had some pieces from leftover cutting boards that I had made in the past. I got some cherry here that I'm going to make a thin border, and I got some mahogany that I'm going to make the outside border. I got some mahogany here that I'm going to use to make my outside border. Now I need to cut this down a little bit so I don't have to trim it up so much after the glue up. Now I think I want to cut this mahogany just to be flush with the board itself, and then I'll just wrap it around in a border fashion. So in order to cut this to the right width, I'm just going to put the board itself up against my blade and bump the fence and set it. And that way I know when I cut this, it's going to be the width of my board. So I got the thin border all clamped up on there on all four sides, so I just gotta let that dry for at least a couple hours, and then I'll work on the outside border. Alright, as always, I'm just making this up, so I let the glue dry on the skinny border for, a couple hours. Probably not fully cured, but it's cured enough that I can add the outside border and re-clamp it up, and then it's going to continue to dry overnight. So probably could use more clamps, but I think this is going to get it done. Alright, so I took it out of the clamps, and as you can see, a lot of this material that I added is sitting proud of the surface of my board so far. Now I had the same problem on the back, and as you can see, it's flush and smooth now, but it didn't happen without issues. The method I decided to try on the back before I did anything on the front was to use this flush trim router bit. I got a bearing on the tip and a bearing on the base, but I only needed to use the bearing on the tip. So my idea was that I would go along the edge of this, and I'd have my bearing rolling along the surface of the board, which I've already flattened and smoothed out. And it would make the new border flush with the board. And for the most part that worked. There was issues with this wanting to rock a little bit, and that would take off more material than I'd like and maybe cause some imperfections. So I don't think I'm going to do that on the front of the board. What I think I will do on the front is set up this stupid thing again and do it this way. So I got my biggest straight bit on there. They make much better bits than this, but this is what I have and it worked before, so I'll do it again. I put it in the thing here, and when I get it just to be sitting on the surface, then I adjust it with this thing here to be just like a 64th or 128th or whatever you want to call it, just into the surface, and then I go back and forth all the way across, taking off a little bit each time and getting the surface flat and flush. So here we go. So I just started, but I wanted to give you an idea of what's going on here. You can see I just did this much here, and I got one of these things down. And you can see the lip, the tiny little lip, all the way across even where the board starts, because I'm taking off just a little bit of material all the way, and that should make everything flush and looking good, not to mention taking off any kind of glue squeeze out and stuff that would be ugly if I tried to put a protective coat on it now. So that's important if you want a good finish, to be able to get a good smooth surface. So I'm gonna get this back over here, and I'm gonna keep moving along all the way across. Alright, so I'm using a template in my flush trim bit to get these rounds on the corner. And what I need to do actually is to take off this, most of this with the either the miter saw or this, what do you call this stupid thing? This one, the jigsaw. I need to take off the bulk of it with the jigsaw and then go at it with the flush trim router bit, clamp this thing on there and handle it. Hey, check out this corner right here. I bet you can totally tell that I had a major case of tear out when I was doing that flush trim bit around the edge. So I had to cut a straight line and put a patch on there and then shape it up again. But It's totally visible, but I'm gonna call it good enough. All right, round over time. I got too excited. I about destroyed everything. Let's fix that. All right, now let's go. And do the same thing on the other side. We're gonna hit it up with some 220 sandpaper. Then we're gonna get it wet just slightly, and then we're gonna let it dry and sand it again with 220. That way you kind of let the wood grain stand up again when you get it wet, and then you sand it down again. They'll be extra smooth, ready for the finish. So I got it wet, and before the final sanding, I'm gonna go ahead and burn my logo in here, toasting my wood doofus. I gave us a practice down there, so it should be good to go. Let's see what we can do. Oh yeah, that's a good one. Sand it up there. Wood doofus is on the case. Tried to get the boys to come down and put oil on their own chessboard, but they didn't want to. I'm gonna film it in vertical in case I want to make a short out of this. All right, so the chessboard is all done. The boys have started to practice for their chess club that they joined. They're knocking over pieces while they play, which is exactly what should happen. I got these pieces on Amazon for like $10. I'll put a link in the description if you're interested in those. I also got some feet on the bottom of this thing right here. I screwed these on, and I got my wood doofus thing. What are you guys doing? Quit screwing around. Put them back on there. There, you're good. Go. Anyway, as always, thanks for watching, and don't be afraid to be a doofus.